Good evening, everyone. David Bay here for your official Mr. Olympia Instagram page. It is Friday night, coming to you live just 1 week out from the 2020 Olympia weekend, just 4 days out from the 2020 Amateur Olympia taking place next Tuesday and Wednesday. We could not be more excited with all the obstacles, all the adversities, and all the roadblocks we faced here in 2020. We are just 1 week out from the biggest event of the year. Tonight's guest is going to be joining us, four-time Mr. Olympia, none other than Jay Cutler himself. We are very excited to have Jay joining us in just a little bit. We are going to be having Jay on here, one of our last Instagram lives on the road to the 2020 Olympia. Guys, we cannot be more excited once again. We are also very excited about bringing you the best, and I mean the best pay-per-view you guys have ever seen from a Mr. Olympia production. You can buy it right now at olympiaproductions.com. You can also find that link on MrOlympia.com. We have 3 packages you guys are going to be able to watch. The fan package, which is going to be absolutely free. That's going to give you coverage of next week Thursday's press conference with all of our top Olympians backstage, or behind the scenes look at the fan pavilion, which is 2020's version of our expo. Things looking a little bit different in a COVID year, but we're definitely still doing it big with our exhibitors and with all the fans. So a lot of action coming to you Thursday free on the fan channel. Now, you can also get the Amateur Olympia Tuesday and Wednesday. If you've got friends or family or somebody that you know competing in the Amateur Olympia that you'd like to watch live, there's a package for the Amateur Olympia. And then, of course, our premium package covering over 15 hours of next weekend's Mr. Olympia, starting with Friday morning's prejudging, which is going to include women's bodybuilding making their return to the stage after a 5-year hiatus, back at the Olympia where they belong. We're also going to have fitness, figure, and 212 bodybuilding. Then Friday evening, you're going to be getting coverage of the finals for all those events and prejudging for the men's open. We're going to see if Brandon Curry can make it number 2, if Phil can make it number 8, or if somebody is going to step up and be Mr. Olympia number 16. Then Saturday morning, you're getting even more coverage. We are going to have men's physique, bikini, and women's physique prejudging. And then Saturday night, we are going to have finals for all those divisions, as well as finals for the men's open bodybuilding. Once again, you can find the link at MrOlympia.com. The website is olympiaproductions.com. You're going to sign up, purchase the package that you're looking for, then download the app. You're going to be able to watch it on your smartphone, on your laptop, your tablet, or your TV if you have a smart TV. So whether you're hanging out by yourself, watching the Olympia with groups of friends, me and the boys used to get together, have big parties watching the Olympia. So exciting times. You guys are even going to get backstage views live from Friday and Saturday evenings, prejudging and finals. So Manager Matt said he heard Jay Cutler is making a comeback. Manager Matt, you sit on a throne of lies. This is not the truth. He's making a comeback to the Olympia, as in Jay Cutler will be at the Olympia next weekend. So for you fans looking to meet Jay, Jay is going to be there. Great question, bodybuilding coach since 1992. What about the wheelchair? That's going to be taking place on Saturday. Thank you for reminding me of that. We are going to see if Harold King Kong Kelly can successfully defend his title. Natalia Coelho saying women's physique on Friday. Natalia, if your program says Friday, then that is my mistake. You guys are going on Friday. So go off of what your program says. Of course, one of our top women's physique competitors, Natalia Coelho, a 2-time Arnold Classic champion. We can't wait to see her on stage at the Olympia. So again, guys, a lot of exciting stuff. Tonight's Instagram interview brought to you by Trifecta Nutrition, title sponsor for the 2020 Olympia weekend and your official meal delivery service of the Olympia. You can check them out at trifectanutrition.com. Literally something for everybody. You order online, organic meals, healthy meals delivered right to your front door. Clean meals, keto meals, paleo meals, vegetarian meals, vegan meals, bodybuilder meals, fitness meals, athlete meals, you name it. They've got something for everybody a la carte. If you just want to get chicken, beef, bison, Trifecta's literally got everybody covered. Check them out at trifectanutrition.com. We're going to see if Jay is ready to roll here. Just one moment. We got Jay jumping on, dropping a comment in, so he should be here any moment. And there he is, Christmas tree. And
Hey, huh?
are those Christmas lights or those disco lights? Did we catch you in the middle of a party or what?
That's the stars on the top of my 15-foot Christmas tree.
We saw some stories of you putting up the other day. It looked very Clark Griswoldish.
Well, I actually thank Angie for that. I watched on the couch while she actually put most of the tree out.
It's not going in the yard. It's going in the living room. Well, it looks like your ceilings are plenty high, but now I feel bad. We don't have disco lights in our living room, so we'll have to get on that. But guys, I don't think I need to introduce him, but I will anyway. 4-time Mr. Olympia, 3-time Arnold Classic champion, as well as 3-time Arnold Classic Most Muscular Award winner. If I forget that, Jay gets on me. And the 1996 NPC Heavyweight National and Overall Champion. Anything else you want me to throw in there?
I wasn't the overall champ, though. I actually lost
You didn't win the overall. Who won the overall that year?
Willie Stallings.
Willie Stallings. Was he? I don't know why I thought you won the overall. I'm pretty good with my NPC history too.
Out of DC, I never won the nationals in the teenage. Branch Warren beat me in the overall at the teenage nationals. I lost the overall. Remember that back then each class winner got their card at the nationals, where the USA you had to win the overall to get a pro card. It was a lot harder to get a pro card back then.
Yeah, USA's used to be just the overall. They bumped it to 2 and then 3, and now of course in bodybuilding all of the class winners, which I think with the introduction of the 212 division, you really had to do, because historically speaking at the USA's, unless you had a phenomenal middleweight, it was usually a toss-up between the light heavy, the heavy, and then of course after 1999 the super heavyweights. But it was pretty rare those days for a middleweight to earn a pro card. Anyhow, Jay, we are 1 week out from the Olympia, a stage that you are very familiar with. You took it a number of times, walking away as the winner 4 times. A little bit of a tricky year we've had here in 2020, but we've almost made it. A very interesting storyline with this year's Olympia. Phil Heath looking to do what, if I'm correct, you were the only Olympia competitor in history to do, which is be defeated on stage and then come back and win your title. Am I correct in saying you're the only champion that's ever done that, right?
Yes, to my understanding. Of course, you have Dexter there, who's won it before. He's trying to come back to win another one before he stepped also. But Phil took a year out. I think needed to fix a couple things, and I feel he'll be a very strong contender coming next week.
Yeah, now Phil isn't one of the guys that gives us a lot of updates. And I think between him and his coach, Hani Rambod, who I speak to fairly frequently, especially as we get closer to these shows, that's not really part of their game plan. And in the era of social media, where there's sponsor pressure and follower pressure and everything to post pictures, Phil keeps it pretty low key. Do you think that's a strategy thing, a mental thing, or just he doesn't really care about sharing pictures thing?
I think I've worked with Hani Rambod before. I think it's kind of something where he always preferred him to stay under wraps a little bit, where it may affect people differently in their head with the exposure of what they kind of look like. Some guys thrive off of it. Others, it may mess with their head a little bit. So I think, for him, he always took that different approach. It's not anything. It's been the same pretty much through his whole career. He stayed pretty low key, and he might show a glimpse. I'm sure he looks amazing, but he's definitely one to watch for sure.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, and we talked about Phil making a comeback. Of course, he's making a comeback to get his title back, but he's really only been away from the stage for a year. So this isn't an Arnold-esque comeback where it's 4 or 5 years away, or speaking of Iris Kyle coming back after a 5 or 6 year layoff, he's only been missing for 2019. So as far as what we can expect, it's not like we're seeing an aged Phil coming back or this drastically different Phil.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Phil. I mean, still out there promoting himself through the off season, and we never saw Phil get smaller. That's kind of where there's a telltale on what to expect coming into this contest. Where, for example, when I stepped away in after 2011 and took 2012 off, I downsized quite a bit from an injury. Where I don't think Phil suffered downsizing. He was pretty much back in the gym, consistently training. He was updating. He was traveling, still doing his appearances, and everywhere he showed up, he looked like the Mr. Olympia Phil Heath that we expect. So, I don't see anything really derailing him from being at least the same size and, the same Phil Heath we saw won 7 in a row.
I think people are pretty well familiar with the fact that he's had some abdominal issues, some surgeries, some hernia issues. But aside from that, as far as we know, and sometimes athletes don't make it public, but as far as we know, Phil's never had any sort of major injury. No torn biceps, no torn pecs, no accidental quad slips or anything that unfortunately happens sometimes. So it's not like Phil's coming back after facing some sort of really uphill battle. He's just kind of making his return to what was his business for a very long time.
Yeah, I don't think him or Hani would allow him to step on stage anything less than what he was capable of. And I don't think a planned comeback and the hype train that we've seen for this year's Olympia would be in his cards, knowing that, hey, I still have this mishap that people tend to believe lost him the Olympia in 2018. I think he's resolved to the point where I think there's no concern, and he's comfortable getting on that stage next week at his best.
Now you've been in his spot. You spent a lot of years chasing Ronnie Coleman. You won 2 years in 06 and 07. You lost in 08. When you came back in 09, it was arguably the most, or certainly one of the most dominating Olympia victories that we've ever seen from a champion. Essentially, when you came out and did your famous quad stomp and your individual presentation, for those of us watching at home and the fans in attendance, judges, it was kind of an open and shut case of, okay, Jay's back in a major way. What was that year like training? I mean, you spent so much time chasing Ronnie. You make it to the top of the mountain, and then you lost to Dexter. Now, granted, Dexter in 08 was for as consistent and as good as Dexter's been. I mean, he was big, he was full, he was on. Maybe some insight to what maybe Phil has gone through this last year, knowing what it was like for yourself. What was that year like between 08 and 09 for you, your off season, your next contest prep, trying to get that?
To be honest, David, it took a lot of pressure off. When you have that bullseye on your back and you're Mr. Olympia, there's a lot of weight, right? There's a lot of expectations. People expect you, when you win it. I mean, he won it 7 times. I mean, they expect you to come better each time. It's really hard to do, and it puts a lot of pressure on you. But when you can train a little more relaxed and know that, okay, I'm going back to the drawing board. I'm not doing anything drastically different, but at the same time, I can train. And with him, I think, he had just one little mishap. I think, his confidence, it really helps boost your confidence back up. I mean, you're not sure. The whole thing about the Mr. Olympia can't come back and win it after being beat, it's kind of been defeated now. There's a lot of these kind of like these beliefs that once, records aren't made to be broken sometimes. And when you're in that game, you just really, you have to believe. I trained the same as I ever trained, I'll be honest. I mean, when I lost, I trained the same way. I just, I paid attention to the off-season diet. I tried to avoid the injuries. And I came back with the confidence. And, I worked under the tutelage of Hani back then. And, he gave me that kind of push. He gave me that positivity. And it really put me in a different mindset. And I was able to come back and conquer all. And, and you saw, I won historically coming back to win it pretty handedly. And, but once the show's over, it's on to the next one. So I feel that he's kind of regrouped himself. And I'm sure, if he's mentally prepared, it's a mental game. It's a lot more mental than physical. So I think he'll be ready to get up there and put everything to sleep that is doubtful in people's minds.
Well, I have a pretty good relationship with Hani Rambod. I've emceed some of his shows. I've known Hani for a number of years through the industry rather. I believe it was a story he was telling me. I want to say he said he saw you at about 10 days out from the '09 Olympia. I want to say it was 10 or 12 days out. And he said he knew. He knew. Was there a point in your comeback in '09 where you looked at yourself in the mirror and it was like, okay, I'm getting my title back?
There was always some. You never know who shows up on contest day or what you're going to land like, especially when you're a bigger guy. I mean, leading up to the show, even a week out, I was 280, where I came down in the 250s when I competed. So for me, there's a lot of water loss. My body carries a lot of water as I dial down. So there was always the expectations of, okay, this is going to work, but what if it doesn't, right? But more importantly, I had a good team around me. I had a lot of support. It was probably one of the best off-season training routines I ever had. I had, people around me taking pictures on a daily basis. But I'm a confident guy anyway, and some people take it as arrogance. But I really thought, okay, I lost it. I'm still more dominant than these guys. I still had better structure, in my opinion, meaning I had the shoulder width. I mean, I battled the best of the best. When you beat Ronnie Coleman, you really don't fear anything else in your life, to be honest. I mean, I battled him a lot of years, and when you beat that guy, there's nothing more to really overcome. There's no one that will ever be to that level of Ronnie Coleman, and that's no disrespect to the other guys, but Ronnie Coleman was next level to compete against, and I was able to overcome that later in his career, of course.
I got a question about the '09 Olympia. Now, I'm an old school bodybuilding fan, and I know you are as well. Throughout the history of bodybuilding, there's been a handful of really iconic photos. If we look behind me, I think the Arnold with his hands out is one of those. A few shots of a handful of competitors over the course of the years. When you did the quad stomp, did you ever think that it would become one of bodybuilding's just most iconic photographs ever taken?
No, because it wasn't really a pose, Dave. It was one of those moments where I hit my leg, I looked down at my leg, and I don't even know if I even thought to tense the other parts of my body, like my midsection and my arms. I looked down at my leg to make sure the cuts were there that I saw a couple hours earlier at my house, and someone snapped that picture. I think it was Per Burnell, actually, and it sits as probably one of the greatest bodybuilding pictures ever now. So for me, it wasn't a planned pose, and now of course we kind of have this quad stomp thing that we talk about. You even mentioned the kid at the Nationals that just won, right?
We were waiting for the stomp.
So it's just awesome. It's pretty cool to have a historic pose. But the legs were my strong point. I mean, those striations, we don't see that as much. So when you got them, I mean, you got to flaunt it, right?
Yeah, it's funny. Flex Wheeler, of course, his front relaxed photo from, I believe it was '98 or '99, taken by Gary Phillips. Also, we all know that Flex Wheeler picture that we're talking about. Flex will say the same thing about that photo. He's like, I was just kind of setting up and standing there and getting ready. And now I think any bodybuilding fan knows the photo of Flex that we're talking about. It's become also one of that short list of iconic photos. But it's always fun hearing the story behind it because, again, like you said, it kind of grew a personality of its own, I guess. I'm guessing from an autograph standpoint, the quad stomp is what you get the most requests for. Is it correct?
Yeah, of course. I want to shout out to Brian Glenn. He's on here. He pushed me in the gym. There was one of my training partners that, we all geared up together, man. Shout out to him. He really pushed me through those I remember those leg days, and I would kill this guy on those leg days, and he hung in there. He was there for every single one of them. So it's awesome.
All right. So interestingly enough, I've spoken with some of the people who were backstage at that Olympia, and they all kind of shared the same sentiment that when you peeled off, kind of, I don't know if back over in the corner was a dramatization or if you were literally back over in the corner. But the other guys kind of said that they knew when you peeled down that well, that was kind of it for 2009. The first year that Phil won, of course, you were on stage that year. Phil had beat you. Was there a point where you saw Phil backstage? Because you saw him backstage for a few years in a row when you were beating him. Was there a point backstage for his first win where you saw him and you were like, okay, Phil's going to be giving me some trouble this year?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it in 10. I saw it in 2010. He got second that year. In 11, I tore my bicep 3 weeks prior. I kind of knew that I was going to have some problems, so I was so concentrated on that. I was just like, okay, let's just try to. It was more of like, let's get up there, get this thing done, and see where I end up at this point. I kind of had the gut feeling I wasn't going to win it. Ended up second, and Phil won his first. So for me, I kind of know backstage, like 09, I knew I was going to win. 08, I looked really good, I thought, backstage. Unfortunately, when I came off, I ended up, people like, well, you're holding a bit of water. So my confidence is usually high, but of course, with an injury, you're not going to have the confidence that you might have had in the past.
Yeah, now, Phil coming back, a lot of the discussions that we've had about Phil, if we're being blunt, people will argue that Phil in 2018 condition, minus Sean Roden, Phil coming back in that exact same condition in 2019 would have won. So we fast forward to 2020, and we're looking at essentially the same lineup. Sean Roden won't be there. Dexter, being a little bit older, always a threat, Dexter Jackson, but we saw Dexter slip a little bit with his placings last year. Do you think it's any stretch to say that Phil's going to come back and get number 8 this year?
No, I would, if I was a betting man, he would be one of the people I would probably put that bet on. I don't have any doubt that, he's capable. He still has probably, I would say he's one of the more genetically gifted Mr. Olympias we've seen, and people view genetics as different things, whether you get lean enough but the muscle bellies and the way the skin, like I mentioned, lies over the muscle and the insertions, Phil has it all, and especially from the back, which, that's where a lot of the criticisms are made with a lot of the guys, and he can definitely do a lot of damage to pretty much the whole lineup in those back shots.
Let's talk a little bit about that men's open lineup, and we'll dive in a little bit into 212 and into classic physique and into some women's bodybuilding. But we want to focus with you mostly on the open division. Last year we saw William Bonac come in second place, and he's a 2-time Arnold Classic champion, a phenomenal competitor, carries a ton of muscle, but his name really hasn't gotten tossed around too much here in 2020, with all the focus being on Phil and Brandon. What does William Bonac have to do to walk away with a standout?
He's the closest thing we've seen to Phil Heath as far as muscle bellies, roundness, muscle that pops. He's a hidden guy right now. He's training. He's one of our international guys that trains overseas, and he's as dangerous as anyone is. He's been in my top 3 choice all along. I can't see him falling out of the top 3. He's battled Brandon before. They've gone back and forth, maybe controversially, or it was very, very close. I think at one point decision the Arnold one year, but. When you have that roundness and you have that condition and that consistency, you can't overlook that. So he just doesn't have the airtime that some of the other guys have. He's just one of these. He's not very vocal, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's a bodybuilder. He's a hardworking guy, and he's coming strong for this thing. I mean, people keep leaving him out of the positioning, but he's definitely a front runner for this contest.
From a media standpoint, it was interesting. As the social media director for the Mr. Olympia, I keep up personally, keep a very tight pulse on who's posting what as far as progress pictures, and we've had some questions about the lack of promotion for William Bonac, and it's certainly not an underestimating him thing on the Olympia side, but like you said, he stays pretty quiet. He's had a handful of updates with him training where he's relatively covered up I think one most muscular. We shared a video today of him doing some back training because it's been one of the first real looks that we've been able to get at his physique during this prep. But certainly you're absolutely right. He brings that full muscle bellies and great conditioning. Now, speaking of conditioning, last year there really wasn't much of a question who had the conditioning on lockdown. It was Hadi Chupin from Iran. And in speaking with Hani Rambod, Hadi didn't necessarily even have the full time to prep for last year's Olympia because there were so many questions regarding whether he was going to be able to get here. I know they're working very diligently on getting him over here this year. We're optimistic and hoping that he can be at this year's Olympia. But what did you think of Hadi last year? Because again, from a conditioning standpoint and a muscularity standpoint, there was nobody really ahead of him.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, hard condition. Shocked everyone. I predicted him to be in the top 3 last year leading up to the show. Being a 212 competitor moving up into the Open, we weren't sure what to expect when he stood next to the best guys, but definitely held his own. I mean, questionably could have been second or even first in a lot of people's eyes, but very, very dangerous. I mean, he definitely. I mean, I don't know how much bigger he can get necessarily with his frame, or how much he needs to. Because the condition's so tight. I mean, that's one thing with him, and it seems to be a trend of his condition. No matter what the weight limit is, this time he didn't have to work with a weight limit. He's still on point. So anyone's off, he's sliding right into their position to take a better spot.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up that he was a 212 competitor going into the Open because we've seen it before. And actually, William Bonac was one of the other 212 competitors that went to the Open and did so very successfully. But sometimes when we see guys try to push the weight higher, it's at the expense of the conditioning. And we saw Hadi, just over the course of maybe a year and a half. Everybody remembers those pictures from Korea against Flex Lewis, and a year later, here he is competing against the Open guys, beating some people much heavier than him. And the question is, can he keep packing on that mass? Do you think structurally, going up against guys like obviously Brandon and Phil, do you think structurally Hadi Chupin has what it takes to be the Mr. Olympia from an aesthetic standpoint, not quite as gifted as some of the other guys?
Listen, Dexter Jackson beat me to win the Mr. Olympia. People always said he was too small. I mean, back then, we always viewed this, Mr. Olympia as like a guy that weighed 260 plus and, was 5'9" plus. But anything is possible. I mean, I put him in the class with Bonac. Hadi's in that class. I mean, we talked about, even the prior, Flex Lewis was going to do this show. He was contending. But I don't think Brandon Curry's an overly structural big guy. I think Phil Heath is still bigger structurally than Brandon. I think Brandon's shoulders are a little wider, but I think smaller bones. So I think, any of these guys in this era, if the condition's right, there's no always too short it gets to that point. But those guys aren't going to be held back from winning this contest if it comes down to who's the best on that stage. It's not going to be, he's too short to be Mr. Olympia. I think Dexter in today's era broke that trend, and I think it will continue. We're going to see a champion that's not 5'9" or 10 or 11 end up winning a Mr. Olympia at some point.
Now, when talking about structure, it's pretty clear. I would say since you walked away, the biggest structure belongs to Ramy. But he's an interesting story. We saw him come on the scene with a ridiculous win at the New York Pro in 2013 and in 2014. And for as insane as he looked back then, I don't know that we've seen like a crazier look from Ramy really since 2013 or 2014. And certainly he's one of the best in the world. He's won multiple shows. He's a fan favorite, just a super nice guy on and off stage, behind the scenes. But he got as high as second, so obviously the tools are there. But he just seems to not fulfill that potential. And here we are talking 7 Olympias later. So I mean, at what point, do we say, hey, Rami needs to step up and make some changes or win, or it's just not going to happen?
Yeah, he's got the curse. His name is Big Rami. That's the kind of the curse, right? We expect way too much from Rami. We always say he just needs to come in lighter. It's not that easy sometimes, and people put numbers to their weight. Like if he comes in at 280, he'll win. But I think he just, for him, it's another one of these things. He trains overseas. He comes over. I don't know if he's just psyching himself out. It looks like this year, he's training with Dennis James the last, couple of weeks to kind of maybe keep his head together a little more, meaning like keep outside people saying, hey, you should do this, do that. I think Dennis was there in 2013 when he was we probably questioned his best. Listen, Rami's been great since, like you said, he got second at the Olympia one year. Nicest guy in the world, but how hard do you want it? Like, how aggressive can you be up there? I would love to see him get up there and be a little more aggressive and and really pose some of these guys on 1-to-1 and just be confident that it's his time. So we're all waiting. Never going to say it's never going to happen. We all hit our peak once or twice in our careers. And this hopefully is going to be the peak of Rami, and he could walk away with this show. We always said an in-shape Rami, if he's 100%, he wins this contest. And his legs are a little oversized, so I hope the balance is a little better than it has been in the past, and he's kind of laid off that because it does throw his physique off a little bit. And let's just see what he ends up like next week.
No, I've been speaking with his coach, Chad Nichols, a little bit, and from what it sounds like, Chad and Rami have put together a plan where they're actually going to bring him in a little bit lighter. They're not sure whether that's going to mean in the 280s or 290s, but their goal is definitely a little bit lighter. Do you think a 285-pound Rami can walk away, Mr. Olympia number 16?
Listen, I think a 300-pound Rami can if he's in the right balance and condition. I hate these numbered games, but and let me just touch. Just too many coaches over the years too. We've seen him work with pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
Hard for people to get the really pinpoint people's physiques if they've been bouncing from coach to coach, and too many opinions. Too many different variables. So let's just see how he lands. I wouldn't worry about the weight. I just worry about what the mirror says, and and standing next to the best guys, and overcoming your weak points, and really showing the guys weak points next to you.
Now, I want to kind of circle back to something that you said. Too many people in his ear, and it's interesting because anybody that's coming up as an amateur knows exactly what that's like. You have 5 people from the gym telling you should do this or that. Maybe a coach saying you should do this. Another bodybuilder that saying you should do that. When you were Mr. Olympia, you obviously you worked with Chris Aceto, you worked with Hani Rambod. As the best in the world, did you still have that? Did you still have like the buzzing in your ear of people that you might look at and be like, hey, you're not really in a position to give me advice? Did you have all those people trying to tell you what you needed to do?
Yes, but more importantly, the judges would tell me, hey, you need to be better here or there. So when I'd go back and I would converse it with my team, sometimes it's like, hey, you know what, you're going to sacrifice here. So, let's the example of like when you bring that crazy condition from the back, usually you have to sacrifice something from the front side to bring that crazy condition, unless it's just genetic. And sometimes that throws off the front side of your physique. So you have to find the right balance to really make those adjustments that allow the overall package, instead of focusing on necessarily one body part, to be its absolute best. And there was plenty of weaknesses I had. The point is not to really expose myself those weaknesses, and really just try to expose the weaknesses of the competitor next to me, with the transitions and certain poses and the way I hit those poses. It's a chess game. That's what these guys, they should be studying. I used to sit there and study my guys, like what their strong points was. And I looked at poses and I'm like, I can't beat that. So how am I going to do something that's going to take the judge's eyes away from that pose and look at me instead? And that's how I would kind of plan out my strategy when I get on stage.
Speaking of strategy, what did you think of the challenge round in 04?
Well, listen, it was very close to me winning. It was kind of a bullshit call, Dave, because if you remember, the last pose came down to a rear lat spread, and my lat spread was pretty damn solid then, or maybe it came down to abs and thighs or something, and I lost, and it was just ridiculous. But I thought that whole thing was a little silly, but they were just trying to create a little more excitement. When Ronnie Coleman shows up every year, he's winning, and I was second. They needed to do something for the pay-per-view television at that point to try to draw some more fans in. And, they had Triple H there, which was really cool. I mean,
Yeah.
who didn't look up? He grew up near me. So I remember when he was, still wrestling as Hunter, and of course, it was just a different, it wasn't what we were used to. But remember, I came from bodybuilding, the first Mr. Olympia at Mandalay Bay, 99, my first one. We didn't really have an expo then. So it was like we didn't have the commitments of, oh, come meet the Olympians and all that stuff. It was like, okay, we had a press conference. You showed up at a show, competed, and you went home. You didn't have to go to booths and do fan meetups or anything like that. So it's really changed along the way.
Yeah, and I'll agree. I thought, when I remember hearing about the idea of the challenge round and watching it and thinking it was fun. It was a little bit interesting seeing everybody call Ronnie out, of course, for the abs and thighs, which I believe, if I'm correct, Dexter lost in abs and thighs to Ronnie that year. Our good friend Olympia MC Bob Ciccarillo has joked about bringing back the challenge round, except having some sort of immediate voting system with the with the fans. You get the clickers under your booth like the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Which would be interesting. But I agree, it was a fun change. I just don't think it quite worked out the way that they wanted it to, which was the reason why we didn't see it back in 05 or any year after that. So, but yeah, a fun year for the newer bodybuilding fans joining in, or people who weren't familiar. In 2004 Mr. Olympia, after prejudging, there was a round where the athletes all got to call out another athlete, pick your pose, and go that. If I'm correct, I remember Dexter being pretty upset because I think he went from third place to fourth behind.
Gustavo Bedell won that challenge round, Dave.
Yeah.
And Ronnie was so mad. He was so mad because I think he actually won money for the challenge round too, whether it was 10 or 15 or 20 grand. So Ronnie wanted to pick up that money too. He wanted to win. He wanted to win the money, the Escalade, and the challenge round money.
But you knew people were going to call him out on the ab shot, and he was gonna lose a little bit of ground over that. But in any regard, a fun piece of Olympia history there. But I think I will say over the course of the past few years, and I'm not sure if it's going to be Tyler Mannion or Steve Weinberger making the final calls here at this Olympia. But I will say, to Steve Weinberger's credit, Steve has done a phenomenal job of mixing up that final call out and really moving those guys around, putting different people in the middle, and creating just a level of hype and excitement in that arena that the fans are looking for. So in the absence of the challenge round, again, our Olympia head judge, Steve Weinberger, switching guys up in different positions. Of course, when you're in the middle, that kind of gives you the signal that you're in first place. But then when Steve puts Ramy in the middle and, you start the fist pumping. Of course, Phil every year, notorious for Phil when Steve puts somebody else in the middle, Phil kind of does this, calm down. This is what Steve does. And then when he puts Phil back in the middle, he kind of just shakes his head. One thing I did want to talk about with Phil, our dear friend, and we send the best wishes to him and his health, Peter McGuff. Peter titled Phil Heath as Mr. Saturday Night. For as good as he's been at every Olympia, he's always seemed to come out a little bit better on the second night. I think what we really saw in 2018 is he couldn't afford to do that. Do you think coming into this year's Olympia, that would be your strategy again, to try to focus on Saturday, or does Phil need to come out guns blazing on Friday?
He needs to come in spot on. It's very rare that a guy comes in the same on Friday and Saturday. I can honestly tell you from my experience. I was always better Saturday. The nerves are gone. You kind of know where you stand. I think putting on that tan and oil and then showering it off and putting on the next coat, I think that has a lot to do with it, with your skin tone also. But definitely the nerves. And I think for him, he needs to really be on point Friday night. All eyes are on him, right? I mean, usually it's on the returning champion, Curry. But you're going to have those two guys as like the spotlight guys. And then you're going to have the other people that are trying to shake up that cart some, which, listen, a guy can leapfrog. I mean, I've done it in the past. Ronnie Coleman did it. I came up from 8th. Ronnie came from 9th. I hate talking about the top guys based on what was there last year or who's hyping who, because there's so many guys that could leapfrog and really shake up this top 2 or 3 or 4 that are, have potential to do that. And I hate to be a critic and have to analyze these guys and say this guy has the weak point here or there, but that's what I came on to do. People did it to me. But when the returning champ is usually expected to win, we kind of know where the top 2 or 3 is going to be looking. But you never know who's can shake that thing up. So no disrespect to the other guys, whatever I comment on this lineup.
No, and we've seen, a name that's popping up on some people's radar is even Hunter Labrada. We saw some incredible progress pictures from here today. I know we don't talk too much about weight, but weight-wise, he's sitting there with some of the other top guys. He's in the middle as far as the height range. Of course, we've got some other big names there showing up. Yeah, I mean, as far as the top 5, you kind of have an idea. You look at Phil and Brandon and Dexter and Hottie and Ramy and Ruley and William. But there's always guys who can come up and step up and like you said, do that leapfrog. And I think that's one thing that's exciting. As bodybuilding fans, we always kind of have our predictions. We make posters for promotional stuff, and to see somebody come in and jump in and really shake things up is always exciting. Now, speaking of shaking things up, if we look at the 212 division, we have last year's champion Kamal El Argagni, who came in an absolutely, ridiculous condition and knocked off who a lot of people thought was the favorite in Derek Lunsford. This year we have George Peterson coming up from Classic Physique to 212. George has been at the Olympia before in Classic. And we've seen some updates from George. Of course, on Olympia, it's a bodybuilding competition. There's 8 poses. But George's back is pretty next level insane right now. Is George Peterson somebody who can win an Olympia title, or is this a Derek, Kamal, Sean Clarita type race?
Listen, I know what Kamal looks like right now. It's going to be tough for any of these guys to beat him, in my opinion. Peterson definitely is a guy that, he was 3rd every year he was in Classic. He moved it up to 212, won a show there, and of course qualified pretty handedly. He is dangerous. He's going to want to be one of the taller guys in the class. He has the crazy condition, like you said, the best back in that division. Lunsford's definitely the most genetically gifted guy, in my opinion, meaning like he has the best all-down structure, but we've just seen him miss it slightly. And even the year that Kamal got 3rd, before he did win it, it was close. He could have been or should have been 2nd in people's eyes. So I just think Kamal's improved so much. I know what he looks like today. I don't see him missing the mark much, so I would pretty much give him credit for a number 2 victory. And he's been here in the States. He doesn't have the stress. He's been training in Florida under Flex Lewis's camp over there. So for me, I think, George can definitely be in that top 3. He could be 2nd. He could be 4th. He could be 5th. There's just so many great guys. That's going to be the division to watch. And that's the cool thing. And just to go back to the men's open for a second, is what's unique about this year is that the show has a lot of guys that contender wise are very close. And that's why you have to tune in and watch this thing, because it can go any way with any of the top 10 guys. Take your top 2 out. Those guys can interchange pretty easily. In the 212, I see the same way. There's just so many names and so many, guys. Ascanani's been 2nd. He's in there. Peterson, we got Guy Cisternino. There's some new guys that, I'm sorry if I don't follow it as close as I did, but there's so many new guys that really could really be contenders here. Sean Clarita, I know he's been there. He's like the giant killer. But I think, Peterson's definitely going to have to come in top shape. That's for sure.
Now, Kamal has been here for a while in the States. And when I found out he was here, given everything that's going on with COVID, an incredibly smart strategy. One, not just from a travel standpoint, just a logistical standpoint, getting here early, but from a stress standpoint. Given everything that's going on with COVID and rumors about certain people having trouble with travel, if you were somebody living overseas, what sort of time frame would you have given yourself? Would you have tried getting here a few months early, or 6 weeks, or?
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the guys don't have the finance or the relationships to come and camp out for 10 weeks. But you're asking me. I mean, I buckled down for shows 16 weeks out. I didn't travel much, but I would start training camp then, and nothing would really deviate from that. So I definitely would have not waited until 2 weeks out. We've seen a lot of even the women bikini competitors come from Brazil. I mean, they competed and qualified. I think Atilia did that, and she stayed. I think the smart play is definitely get there early, so you're not dealing with, especially during COVID and with restrictions, with visas and everything else. We're going to see some guys that aren't going to be able to show up at this show because they waited till last minute. I guarantee that.
It seems like such basic, vanilla, cliche advice for Derek Lunsford. If he comes in again and finds himself in a second or third place spot, what do you say to somebody like Derek? Because like you said, genetically speaking, look, nobody's going to argue that he's at the top of that 212 division with Flex Lewis gone. And of course, very high expectations when he came in 2017. He had just turned pro, 2 months before, won his pro debut, qualified for the Olympia, top 5, and then the next year places second to Flex. And then you have a wide open 212 last year, and a lot of people thought that he was going to walk away. I mean, if we have another year, his 4th year without taking home that title, what sort of advice do you give to Derek beyond just, hey man, you got to be leaner?
He's going to win it. There's going to be a time he will win the Mr. Olympia. There's no question. He's young. We all want to win it a little earlier than sometimes it happens, but he will win it just on his shape alone. That's where his condition can be a little off, he's still beating guys that are in better condition because his shape is so incredible. So he's just going to find the right formula, and maybe, let's just see. I never want to say, I never want to talk negative, like it's not going to happen. Hopefully he hits it right. If he hits it right, man, he wins this show just based on what the body is. But from what I've seen with Kamal, he's in the driver's seat to win number 2.
Now, we talked a little earlier about Hottie. We talked about William Bonac, and there is a lot of talk about, look, a 212 guy can't come into the Open and be successful. You're going to be too short, too small of a frame. Hottie's proven that wrong. William Bonac has won 2 Arnold Classics in the Open, and it's hard to go off of just progress pictures. But when you talk to the people around Derek, when you see his progress pictures, his conditioning, honestly, when he's sitting around 225, 230, from what we've seen, looks equal to where he's been able to bring it on the stage. I mean, do you think at some point Derek makes a move to the Open?
It really comes down to, I don't know what his whole strategy is. I mean, he could do similar to Flex Lewis, where he could just dominate that class for a certain time. I don't know if he's really struggling to make that weight, but all these guys can go. I mean, you've seen. We talk about the men's physique guys moving to classic. I mean, look at Peterson moving into 212. I mean, people would say he's way too tall for 212, and he's still doing it. So it really comes down to what the structure is, and if it's his choice, if he says, okay, I'm not as challenged in this division, I need to move to a different one. That's usually the sense. I mean, usually if a guy's maxed out, just like Flex said, you know what? I've done everything I could do in this. It's harder for me to get the weight at that amount of muscle that I carry. I'm going to move up to the Open division. I mean, but Flex chose to do it he won 7 years in a row, right? So he didn't make that move in the middle because obviously he was challenged every year and he felt that was enough. And now he's just going to go all out and next year try the Open. So I don't know. It's tough to say. I'd have to ask him and sit down and really kind of pick his brain a little bit.
Yeah, and you talked earlier about pressure for competitors, and I don't think there's a guy out there right now, maybe short of, Ramy, who's had more consistent pressure over the course. I mean, you come in, the young kid wins the USAs, wins the pro card, top five, his first Olympia, in his mid-20s, and really, a preview of things to come for the future of bodybuilding. So I would imagine from a pressure standpoint, Derek's a very level-headed individual, a very nice guy, great with his fans. You'd be very hard-pressed to find anybody who has anything other than incredibly positive things to say about Derek. But from a pressure standpoint, I would have to imagine, especially at his age, it's pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, all these guys, I mean, I have relationships, whether I see them or don't see it, we connect through social media. Very respectful, but you have to be a dog, man. You got to do it. You got to want to fight it. When you get up there and you have no friends, you don't care, about all your problems. You just want to win this contest. And, Ronnie and I were enemies when I got on that stage, even though we were friendly off the stage, and people always question our rivalry because the magazines would kind of put this way against us. But truly, when I got on that stage, I wanted to beat this guy. I had no respect for him when I got on that stage. Because I thought I was the best, and sometimes you got to have that mindset getting up there.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's been a bit of an interesting dynamic with the open guys, because we've talked to no end about the difference between camaraderie today and the old school guys, but now it seems like there's even more distance between competitors. Brandon's training in Kuwait, Ramy's in Egypt, Williams in the Netherlands, Rowley's, in Curacao. Phil seems like he kind of trains angry. Hunter Labrada, is gunning for everybody. Dexter's Dexter. It seems, for as much as we've talked about it, it seems especially now, and especially in a COVID year, that there's really not much love lost between these guys getting ready for this show.
Yeah, Phil's angry, man. I'd be coming back like with a chip on my shoulder. Hunter seems to have, look, his dad was, world class, right? His dad is legendary. His dad was my idol, man. So that's pretty amazing. I remember seeing pictures of Hunter when he was a baby, and everyone has a different arsenal, right? And different mindset. But for me, like I said, when I get up there, it was like, and Curry, I think, has a chip on his shoulder. He's the nicest guy in the world, but he should get up there and be like, I'm not going to respect Phil Heath's 7 titles. This is my time. And that's how you need to create. I think the only one up there, Hadi Chupin, was probably the happiest guy just to be there. And he still got out there, and he wasn't aggressive, disrespecting, but man, I was like watching him, and he didn't need to. He was just like hitting the shots, and the crowd was totally behind me. People's champ last year. It's just, certain people have that mystique about them, and everyone finds their way, and they have their own personality. And like I said, some people have the chip, some people don't. But aggression was a little necessary for me to really get up there and showcase what I had.
Yeah, no, I will say, as far as iconic pictures go, last year at the Olympia, when Dexter was announced fourth, and Dexter went to go shake Hadi's hand, and Hadi did the salute. That has become, it was, our friend Matt Daniels, manager Matt, I think, was the first one to actually share that. And then it went crazy viral, because it was one of these situations where, with everything going on in the world and everything and all the drama and stuff, it was just this ultimate show of respect from the new guy to somebody as well respected as Dexter. But you bring up a really good point. Brandon Curry, historically speaking, as far as his personality, his demeanor in the industry, has been very mild-mannered, incredibly well-spoken, a great Mr. Olympia from an ambassador standpoint. But he's definitely different this year than he's been any other year. We interviewed him last week. He's been doing a lot of media stuff. And the talk about Phil, there was talk last year about him being a fill-in champion. And it's put a sour taste in his mouth. There's no doubt about it. We talked to Lee Haney down in Orlando at the NPC Nationals, and Lee predicted that Brandon will win just because he's got the most to prove. Him and Bob were talking about, look, Phil wants number 8. Phil wants to prove that he's still got it. He's chasing history. He's chasing records. He's chasing a giant paycheck. And Lee made a very good point in saying, look, Brandon's a different Brandon Curry. Do you think he's been disrespected or written off, or do you think this is just the nature of bodybuilding in the peanut gallery, having their conversations about, who they think deserves what?
I think he's been disrespected. Absolutely. Phil Heath Phil Heath's taken all the hype, from this year of him coming back for number 2. The hype has been around Phil Heath coming to return to chase 8, and can Brandon repeat, but it's kind of like secondary. And, you have your mix of people who believe, we talk about Phil Heath. It's kind of like when I won the Mr. Olympia, and people said, well, you didn't beat the best Ronnie Coleman. There was questionable what year was his best. And he got older. There's no question. He was injured. I won. So people disrespected that too, to a sense, but it didn't bother me because we all get old. We all end up, having to step away. Dexter seems to be the only one that hasn't really, I still have him chasing top 5, where anyone at 51 would be tough to do that. And Kamal's the same way. I think he's 50 years old, but
yeah.
Disrespect to Brandon. When have we ever had a returning Mr. Olympia be even 50%? Is he going to repeat? It's been a long time. I don't know if it's ever happened. I felt Roden kind of got the same thing a little bit, although he never got a chance to defend his title. But I felt like, they said, well, Phil Heath was off. That's why, Sean won. And then others said, no, Sean's just a better bodybuilder. So you have your critics. But at the same time, to answer the question, yeah, Brandon's been disrespected a little bit. I would definitely have a chip on my shoulder, no matter how nice I was.
Do you think Phil's press release earlier on this year really gassed up that fire? And for those of you not familiar, Phil did a press release announcing his return with his management team, which is tied in with 7 Buck Productions and Danny Garcia and The Rock. And instead of mentioning Brandon Curry's name, they said something along the lines of, the beefcake who held on to Phil's title while he was gone, or something like that. And of course, Brandon has, done hashtag beefcake. You think doing a press release and calling him a beefcake instead of using his name, might have fueled the fire a bit for Brandon?
I don't know. If they're talking about him, that's a great thing, right? He's still a returning champ, but I don't really know what that means. I don't know what the definition of a beefcake is necessarily, and I don't know how much of a dig that is. If they sit there and said, oh, he's a paper champion or something like that, it would be a lot more disrespectful, right? But, I think he kind of took it the way Brandon Curry takes a lot of things. He's relaxed. He's professional. Much credit goes out to this guy, man. I watched him in a COVID year represent Mr. Olympia the best that probably anyone could have.
Absolutely.
Okay? So we have a lot of people pushing for Brandon Curry, including myself. I'm pushing for all these guys. I have a reason to push for Dexter to win this thing. Can you imagine Dexter coming and winning his, final Olympia? I know what Phil feels like, and to lose, that would be awesome for him. And, for Hadi Chupin to come in and represent Iran and win this contest. There's just so many great stories to it. But, Brandon definitely, he has something to prove at this contest, I think, more than a lot of the guys.
You bring up something, and this is why we have Jay on, insight that you're not going to get from anybody else. You bring up a really interesting point. Regardless of who wins this year, if we look at the guys who are the top, 6 or 7 guys, it's really a great story. Anybody, look, Phil comes back. Look, he ties Ronnie and Lee Haney. He comes back and wins. Look, Brandon Curry wins. He proves a point. I'm a real champion. Dexter Jackson wins. I think people will probably be crying in the audience. It would be, I think you'll see, win, lose, or otherwise, Dexter's going to get an ovation of the likes which we've probably never seen before at the Olympia. Hadi Chupin, just like you said, the nicest guy representing Iran. Ramy fulfilling his potential. So it's really an Olympia year of of stories. And we have, as our good friend J.M. Mannion brought up, we have, I think, half of the divisions have three, including current and past champions competing, and that's never happened before. Classic physique has Breon, Chris, and Danny Hester. Bodybuilding, you have Phil Brandon and Dexter. In women's bodybuilding, you have three Rising Phoenix world champions, Ann and Iris Kyle. In fitness, we were looking at three champions. Adela had to pull out, but we still have Whitney and Oksana in bikini. You have Ashley and Issa and Angelica Teixeira. So there's so many storylines going into this year's Olympia. But like you said, the men's open, for as much discussion as there's been about Brandon and Phil, there's really a lot of great storylines. A lot of great storylines. Dr. Victor Prisk joining in, our good friend from out east. Big shout out to Victor Prisk. We've been trying to keep up with the comments and the shout outs and stuff like that. Jay getting love from India, Iran, I saw Brazil, Ecuador, Cuba, of course, all over the globe. No surprise there. Yeah, we're really excited about this year's Olympia. I do have to give a shout out as being part of the Olympia team to Dan Solomon, Jake Wood, Tarek and Tamer Al-Gindi, Martine, Tim Gardner, their entire production crew, Heather Wilson, Angelica Nebbia. It's tough to put on an event like this and in a COVID year, and especially in a year where they had to make the move to Orlando 4 weeks out. I was joking with Raymond Edmond. Jay, have you seen the movie National Treasure with Nicolas Cage?
Of course, yeah, it's one of my favorites. Nicolas Cage lives in Las Vegas, Dave. I see him here and there.
So it was funny because I was joking with Raymond last night, and the whole Nicolas Cage thing, I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence. I feel like you could make the same thing with Dan Solomon. Like at 4 weeks out, and Dan Solomon saying, "I'm going to move the Olympia to Orlando." I see this like that same thing, and it's been such a massive undertaking. None of us are sleeping. If I've got bags under my eyes, I have to apologize. I'm not that handsome to begin with, but less now. But in any regard, big shout out, Jay. You're going to be there next weekend, correct?
Yeah, I'm going to be there. I'm excited. I just want to touch a little before, I don't know if we're getting kicked off this thing. I want to continue a little bit if I can, because there's a lot of divisions. I know I'm an open class bodybuilder, and there was no other division. Like you mentioned, nationals, we didn't have a super heavyweight class. It was all heavyweights. But I've watched the transition. I watched Mark Anthony win his first men's physique contest. They created that division, of course, now classic. And we're talking about, people transferring over. And, men's physique has grown tremendously. I'm a show promoter. I promote contests, and I see a lot of these guys working their way up and moving through divisions. But some just fit others better than ever. And I'm a fan of all these classes. The women's bodybuilding coming back is a huge plus, especially for much respect to those women, because even though, I kind of steered away from watching it after a certain point, once I kind of stepped away because it kind of disappeared after, I think, 2015 or whatever, on the Olympia stage, to have that back in there and to have Jake really kind of promote that, it's really positive for those guys. But the classic physique, men's physique, those divisions make up the whole contest. There's so much. I think there's more controversy in men's physique than there is in the men's open at this point, which is kind of cool. Like
I said, I had Raymond Edmonds on last night. Your reigning men's physique Olympia champion, and he's kind of chill. So he doesn't really get involved in that, but we did speak a little bit about some of the drama in men's physique, the back and forth. And I said that I like it, because it brings some fun. It brings some controversy. These guys there's been times where I've seen, I'm not going to start getting into names, but I've seen so-and-so is going live. And I just sit back like a Michael Jackson meme with my popcorn. Like, oh, this ought to be good.
Brandon Hendrickson's coming back to try to reclaim the title. He looks amazing this year. Raymond's been kind of under the radar. Like, we haven't seen much of him. I think this is the first time he popped up on your thing. I just saw someone posted, I don't think it was, maybe it was you guys, about what he looks like yesterday. It looks amazing.
He is absolutely shredded, like ridiculous.
And, you know, Andre Ferguson's always tough in there. I mean, there's just so many great guys, and I've kind of watched that division transpire, and I can't believe some of these. I mean, these guys, I mean, they have such a flow to their posing and how they kind of represent themselves, even though they're not hitting poses necessarily that they probably would like to hit. You know, they're showcasing. So I can't believe how big the guys have gotten since the start of it. So I'm excited to see who comes out on top. You know, I've watched Brandon become champion, you know, beat Jeremy Buendia, and there was a lot of drama between those guys. And, you know, there's only been so many champions, but it's nice to see if Raymond can defend his title, I mean, for the first time.
Did you get a chance to see any photos or any updates from last weekend's Rising Phoenix World Championships down in Scottsdale?
I did not.
The female winner, Andrea Shaw, and certainly all respect to all of our female bodybuilders. It's been a long time coming for the females to come back to the Olympia. It's a very exciting year. As I was saying before, of course, we have the most decorated Olympian in history, Iris Kyle, with 10 wins. You know, after the Olympia was absent, or rather women's bodybuilding was absent from the Olympia stage, we saw Tim Gardner and Jake Wood and his team at the Wings of Strength start the Rising Phoenix World Championships. And that was, you know, for the best of the best. We saw Margie Martin win twice. We saw Helle Trevino win. Then we saw Alina Popa come back. You know, of course, Alina in 2014, a very close second place to Iris Kyle. We saw Alina win. We saw Helle come back and win. And then this year, just a weekend ago, Andrea Shaw. So really, if we're talking about the top of the sport, I know we're not going to say 4 Olympians, but we really have 4 women who are Olympians or world champions. But and she goes by Drea Shaw. And she actually moved up from the women's physique division after being told she was a little big. She got a lot of encouragement from Lenda Murray and Alina Popa to come up. She's really something else. I hadn't seen her before. I wasn't in Omaha, and a friend of ours that works for Wings of Strength is a photographer, Kent Leckie, just a great funny guy from Canada. I was asking him, you know, who thought was the favorite. You know, Alicia Young from Utah we saw at weigh-ins, and she looked, or at check-ins rather, not at weigh-ins, but at check-ins. And she looked phenomenal. And Kent's like, you gotta see this Andrea girl. And he was pretty excited. So, you know, we were sitting there at prejudging, and she came out, and with all the respect due to all of the females, she could very well be the face of things to come and for female bodybuilding. And it's going to be interesting to see her return to the stage. Again, Margie Martin, a 2-time world champion. Helle with, you know, arguably the most, you know, muscularity and density that we see in women's bodybuilding. But I think the fans are going to have a real treat. And, you know, you're going to, the bodybuilding fans, I think in general, are happy that women's bodybuilding is returning to the Olympia. But the one thing I will say for the people who didn't get a chance to catch the Rising Phoenix World Championships, who are fans of bodybuilding and who are fans of women's bodybuilding returning to the stage, you got Drea Shaw she's something. And it's, you know, you almost don't want to compare people to Lenda. You don't, because Lenda's, you know, such an icon, an 8-time champion. And so, you know, when you start throwing around that comparison, you better know what you're talking about, and the person better be pretty good. But Drea Shaw coming to the women's bodybuilding stage, for you bodybuilding fans out there, people who haven't had a chance to see her, she's incredible. And I've been around a long time, and so, you know, for me to be this enthusiastic about a female bodybuilder and in a return, you know, anybody who knows me, I think that would speak volumes. So I think you'll, as a bodybuilding fan, I know you're going to be right up there in the front row. I think you know, I think after the show, I'm going to be like, I told you. But yeah, as in the other divisions, you know, I wanted to talk about fitness a little bit. Instagram's not going to kick us off. I don't want to steal too much of your time. Instagram Live used to do an hour, and then I think like weeks ago they just extended it to you can run for 4 hours. So certainly I'm not going to keep you on here for 4 hours. But yeah, we don't get kicked off quite at 1 hour. But when we talk about returns to the Olympia stage, people are also very excited about Oksana's return. She had, other things she wanted to focus on. I don't think she ever retired because of the fact that she couldn't win again, or she was old, or she had injuries. She really just had other things she wanted to focus on, and I think she went after those. From a performance standpoint, there's really nobody better in Olympia history than Oksana. What do you think about her coming back in the fitness division?
We've shot her on and off of the channel for JTV, and we're huge fans. You got to, Dave, a lot of history with her. She moved to Las Vegas way back when she was placing closer to 10th. She didn't speak English. We used to see each other in the gym, training at Gold's Gym on Decatur, and she would just sit there and, she'd smile, and I'd say hello and come up, and she was so excited. And, man, I watched her work her way all the way to the top. And I was very close to Adela those years when she was winning and really kind of had the signature, best routine. And, she was really dominating. But, Jen Hendershot, all those girls, shout out to, some of the girls that kind of started it. And Oksana just, she probably is the best performer we've ever seen. So for her coming back, I think that's what's exciting people the most. And she's just such a sweet person. And, she learned to speak English and overcame a lot of the obstacles coming over, from Russia. And she's really made an impact in this business, promotes shows and does her thing. And I think that's just something we have to respect. And I think, I'm one of the ones that's going to be excited to watch her routine. I didn't get to watch her a lot of years because I didn't, the women's side, it wasn't, I was either doing something, whether it was commentating or whatever. So it's going to be nice to actually sit and watch this stuff. I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, her routines. She's really a storyteller. When it comes down to it, and she, the last routine she did this, this Michael Jackson routine, where you've been promoting shows, you've been to a lot of bodybuilding shows. I'm sure you've seen some guys try to do moonwalks and Michael Jackson impersonations at shows, and it can be rough. And she had Michael Jackson down to a T. We saw her do the Hot for Teacher routine. We saw her do the Joker routine, the Black Swan routine. And she just really comes out and tells a story. She's going to have her hands full with Whitney Jones. Whitney, her vertical, her high flying, her energy, her dance style is very unique and very aggressive, intense, entertaining style of fitness. Missy Truscott, our Arnold Classic champion, another one of the girls coming out with just a ball of Missy's just a ball of energy on stage, and it's kind of captivating. So, but no, and Oksana also not formally trained as a gymnast or anything, which a lot of people would assume for these fitness girls that they're all gymnasts. Oksana taught herself a lot of that stuff, which speaks to her work ethic a lot.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to watch for sure.
All right. Well, I tell you what, man, we've done a pretty good job. Covered the Olympia top to bottom. Again, Instagram will let us hang out for about 4 hours, but we know you've got things to do. I'm going to get back to doing our stuff here on our end, doing the behind the scenes business of the Olympia. But we want to send a big shout out to our sponsor, Trifecta. Before I let you go, Jay, I did want to remind everybody once again, the pay-per-view, you can check out all the options at olympiaproductions.com. There's going to be a free fan channel covering the press conference, the meet and greet, things like that. You can buy a package to watch the Amateur Olympia next Tuesday and Wednesday. And then Friday and Saturday, you're going to be getting over 15 hours of live coverage, including never before seen backstage footage with multiple commentators who have expertise in different divisions. You can check that out at olympiaproductions.com. But we're really excited, for this year's 2020. Again, so many obstacles overcome, and to have it be a week away and within, in our scope, we're excited. Certainly excited to see Jay there, Drew Nolan jumping in saying Pig Nation.
Yes. Drew Nolan, shout out to Cutler Club, shout out to all my Team Cutler members. I know a lot of people tuned on to this, and shout out to all those fans all around the world. Iranians and all you overseas people. We see Brazil in the house. We have so much support, and I'm sure you guys are excited to check out who becomes the champ in each division next weekend. I know I'm looking forward to it. This is going to be the first show that I hope I get to sit and watch, just because I'm not going to be tied up in an expo the whole time doing meet and greets. It's going to be more of I'm there to support the show, support the athletes, and hopefully get to see some new champions born.
All right. Well, once again, Jay, thank you very much for your time. Thank you to our sponsor, Trifecta. That's going to wrap it up for us here tonight. And we'll see everybody next week in Orlando. Hopefully, we'll be tuning in live on the pay-per-view. Again, that's at olympiaproductions.com. But that's going to do it for us for tonight. Jay, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, all the fans, for joining in. And we'll catch up with you in Orlando.
All right. Thanks, guys. Good luck.